Welcome to 360 Studio, today with British Ambassador to Slovakia, Mr. Nigel Baker. Welcome.
Thanks very much. Great to be here.
Mr. Ambassador, this interview might have a slight problem because the events on the world stage are happening now so quickly that by the time we leave the studio, anything may be off the table and we might not be current, but we will try. So, ceasefire is on the table, negotiated in Saudi Arabia. Ukraine agreed to complete 30-day ceasefire, and currently we are waiting for the response of Russians. What should their response be?
Well, I mean, Russia, as the Prime Minister has said, the ball is in the Russian court. We will see whether they really want peace. We have said all along that that peace could break out tomorrow. All Russia has to do is withdraw its forces from illegally occupied territory. They are the aggressor. They began the war, and they can stop the aggression. That is all that Ukraine has been asking for since February 2022. So this would be an interesting test for Russia. I mean, I hope very much that they will agree. I think Ukraine has moved a long way. We've worked very closely with them, also in relation to the Americans, been in touch very closely with Ukrainian and Americans to put together something that will work for Ukraine, but also will preserve the key red lines for Ukraine. Let's see whether Mr. Putin genuinely wants peace or not.
That's the risk, though, that the ceasefire can only be used to reload and continue fighting, isn't it?
And how do you monitor a ceasefire when? But I think Ukrainian requests are reasonable. Let's start with an end to the aerial bombing, and Russia actually has stepped up its attacks on Ukrainian civilians, on the energy infrastructure in the last few days. So there's that, and also to the end to the war at sea, which has been has threatened global food supplies. Although Ukraine's done a fantastic job in keeping the grain, keeping the fertilizer and other things flowing, but. Yeah, I mean, from our side, we will wait and see. We haven't exactly had the best experience of trusting Mr. Putin and Russia. I seem to remember that 2 days before Russia invaded Ukraine, it said it had no intention of invading Ukraine. So, how far are they to be trusted?
The Minsk agreements repeatedly.
Of course, this is constant. Repeat behavior by the Russian state, which is why it is entirely correct, I think, for the Ukrainians to look for as much support from Europe, from the United States, and guarantees as possible, because nobody wants there to be an unsustainable peace that is simply, as you said, a chance for Russia to reload and start again.
Sure. Last week, a number of European leaders met in London to form a coalition of the willing, as your Prime Minister called it. Around that time, Mr. Keir Starmer made a speech where he announced that the UK will ramp up its defence budget. Let's play a short clip, please.
I know people have felt the impact of this conflict through rising bills and prices. But unless Ukraine is properly protected from Putin, then Europe will only become more unstable. And that will hurt us even more. Furthermore, the great lesson of our history is that tyrants like Putin only respond to strength. So today I have announced the biggest sustained increase in defence spending since the end of the Cold War.
Will it be enough?
Well, I mean, he has said that we have a commitment to increase to 2.5% of GDP by by 2027. But he also said with a trajectory towards 3%. I mean, we're talking about another £30 billion or so into the defence budget. I think one of the reasons why the Prime Minister is looking to form a coalition of the willing is knowledge that we can't do it alone. I think it's absolutely right that we take very seriously America's request, and I think it's a totally legitimate request, that Europe should take greater responsibility for its defence including through NATO.
Sure, but they are asking for 5. You are giving them 3.
Of course, they're asking for 5, but I think that's a good Trump negotiation starting point. There are some European countries like Poland who are going to hit 5. If I bordered Russia, I would probably feel the need for 5%. But I think the collective effort is the key. We've been pushing for many years for NATO allies to do more. And I think what we are seeing, what President Trump has stimulated, and indeed what President Putin and his aggression has stimulated, is a determination in Europe that, yes, we've got to do more and better collectively, spend better, spend more efficiently, and be prepared for peace, potentially, to break down in the future. If we're not prepared, then, as the Prime Minister said, the tyrant spots weakness and will seize his opportunity accordingly.
There are few countries in NATO that are not among the willing, and that includes Hungary and Slovakia. How do you, as a British ambassador to Slovakia, react to that decision of our government?
Look, it's a sovereign decision. The coalition of the willing is not taking place formally within the framework of NATO. But clearly it's a sovereign decision. I mean, I think that I've seen President Pellegrini's initiative to bring together leaders from across the political spectrum to talk exactly about the defence budget, about Slovakia's readiness, about how it might play a role. And I should say that particularly in the first year of the war, Slovakia played an extraordinary, important and welcome role in its supply of weapons and support for Ukraine. It is still doing so on a commercial basis, and I think the fact that Slovakia is developing its defence industry is another important element. That guarantee of European security for the future also is tied to our ability to produce the armaments, the defence material, the technology that we'll need to guarantee our security in the future. Personally, I would love to see Slovakia an active and participant in the coalition of the willing, but I respect the sovereign decision of the Prime Minister for the moment not to bring Slovakia into that group.
What's the British position on this in regarding to, let's say, in the future, governments might change? Will it be possible then, a few years from now, that Slovakia might join later this coalition of the willing, or is it get on the train now, or we are leaving?
No, I don't think that's the case. I think willing is an important word. We don't want countries who are not willing, those countries. I think that, the analysis of most serious observers of European security is that Russia will remain a major threat for a long time to come, and also that Ukraine will need the defence support that guarantees for its security that we can provide through the coalition of the willing. I rather liked I think it was President Pavel of the Czech Republic's phrase, where he said, it's not just a coalition of the willing, it's a coalition of the responsible. We're all responsible for our defence. That's what collective defence means. I welcome the really strong response of countries like, that are not within the sort of European Union, for example, like Norway, like Turkey, like Canada, countries like the UK, of course. We understand that this is actually an existential issue for Europe, our security, the guarantee of our security, and to ensure that we can...
Yes, but the question is, if Slovakia doesn't see it as an existential threat right now, will it be possible to join later when perhaps a new government forms?
I think we'd be delighted to see Slovak contributions to the coalition wing. Slovakia has something to contribute. I've got to know well the Slovak armed forces, its leadership. I've come to respect them, a great deal, and we've worked very closely with Slovakia since the beginning of the war in terms of logistics and supply through to Ukraine. That has been working closely with the armed forces. My sense is the Slovak armed forces are very clear. They would be ready and willing if receiving the political instruction to do so, and they would be very welcome, I think, at any time to join the coalition of willing. And I hope that Slovakia would see how much it is to its advantage, not only to receive the benefit of collective defence, but also to contribute formally to that collective defence across Europe.
Let's hope so. Let's move on to Mr. Trump. While preparing for this interview, I read a piece in New York Times about how Donald Trump's aggressive approach towards Europe is boosting the popularity of centrists in Britain and France or possibly Canada. Is it a glimmer of hope in otherwise a gloomy situation that moderates are gaining a little bit of popularity?
Look, I mean, in the UK, we had elections last year. We had a change of government. I think it's and extremists got nowhere in terms of our own government. That's in part because of our political system. I think part because of the British public is sort of understands the issues that are at stake. I think the US system is very complex. In a way, it's still a 50-50 Democrats-Republican system, and each time there is an election, in the end, it comes down to the economy fundamentally. For all of the other noises off, I think we have seen. I think this is important. A trend, not just of the last few months, but over the last few years of growing attraction of what I would call extremist parties in a number of European countries. This is driven by all sorts of factors. The growing power of social media, and I think linked to that, disinformation. I think the impact of COVID sort of unwound a little bit our societies and our democracies. I think sometimes the attraction in difficult times of seemingly simple solutions is something that can bring people towards the more sort of extremist parties. The sense of the strong leader who will get us out of trouble. It always ends in tears. It never works. But I think that what we are seeing as a counter to that, and I'm not just America, but actually these movements I've described across Europe, is, I would say, a sort of regathering of more centrist forces, be they on the right or on the left, a recognition that Europe needs to step up, that we've got really hard decisions ahead of us, and that requires proper responsibility, which mature democracies, I think, understand, even if some of the solutions can be quite difficult. They have a price tag.
Sure.
They demand responsibilities of citizens that perhaps in easier times would not be required.
Yes, you've mentioned social media. How does Britain view the comments of Mr. Elon Musk, who's gotten very close to the American government? He is verbally attacking also your prime minister. How do you react to the world's richest man trying to interfere in European politics?
So, our view is there's no point in reacting on a daily basis to daily things that can emerge out of social media or the Twitter sphere or Facebook posts or whatever. We focus on what is important for us, on our interests and our concerns. It's not, some of this stuff isn't helpful, but I think at the same time, a mature democracy that's been around a long time can differentiate between the bubble, the social media, the ideas being thrown around, the conversation pieces, and solid, real policies. There's a difference in style, without doubt, from the current US administration, and that's something we have to live with and work with. But I think, You know, when Sir Keir Starmer was in Washington, he showed his own little bit of theatre.
We'll get to that. I will try to get you to comment on that.
So I think the key thing is don't feel the need. We don't feel the need, and others shouldn't, to react to every provocation, every announcement, every tweet, because that's not the way you do mature foreign policy.
Even though it's from the world's richest man.
Even though it's from the world's richest man.
What did you think when you watched that debacle of a meeting in the White House when we witnessed President Zelensky being scolded by Mr. Trump and J.D. Vance? Did you think it was a situation that spun out of control, or do you think we witnessed what Friedrich Merz said was a manufactured escalation?
A čo uvidíte ďalej?
Is it possible that you may have overstepped your boundaries as a diplomat, as an ambassador?
You could say the British monarchy is very substantial, but it is also brilliant theatre.
Do you feel confident that Slovakia would come to an aid under Article 5? Your then Prime Minister pressured Ukrainians to not take a peace deal.
It's complete nonsense. It's Russian disinformation. But you know what killed those negotiations? Not Prime Minister Boris Johnson.
It was the Bucha massacre, right? Do Britons, and more specifically the British government, have maybe a historical guilt from the Munich agreement?
A recognition that it was a massive mistake is clear.
What would you say, as an outsider and kind of an insider, is the biggest advantage and the disadvantage of Slovak people?